Marcelo into Hullet now. Surely one last chance. One last bite at the cherry here in Amsterdam. Ronaldo through to Hullet. Oh, what an ending here in Amsterdam.
If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. Danuso knocked out Ryan on the Xbox, and this time Boras knocked out Italy's finest in Principe.
Yes, 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 you have heard that right. The FUT Champions podcast is back. You're not dreaming. We are back for FIFA 19 in the same place, YouTube, wherever you are watching us from. The FUT Champions podcast has finally made its return. Not just myself, Brandon Smith, but of course, Mr. Richard Buckley, and as always, the main man from Fnatic and Roma, Colin Johnson. But I'm very happy that we've been able to bring the podcast back. We've been wanting to bring it back for quite a long time, but we've all been at loose ends, and when the off-season was there as well, we just didn't think it would be relevant to bring you a podcast. But now we've seen FIFA 19, seen all the plans, seen the global series and all that exciting announcements, and I think we're going to have enough to get our teeth into literally every single week now. So if you are new around here, feel free to go and follow us on Twitter or on Instagram at FUT Champions Podcast. And yeah, get involved. But welcome back to episode 1 of FIFA 19. And without further ado, I've got to introduce the man as always, Richard Buckley. We're back, mate. We are back.
Out of a cold and blustery November the 1st, rose the FUT Champs podcast, live and kicking. We're back. We're better than ever, in my opinion. New intro, new members on board the team, but same cast, Brandon. The same three musketeers are here, week in, week out. Myself, you, and the main man, the American from across the pond, Colin Johnson. How are we?
From across the pond, but living here now, right? So, yep. Yeah, it's good to finally be moved into the gaming house over here. Nice to be close and not have to record this at 7 a.m. my time now. It's much nicer to be on the UK time.
And if you don't know Colin, you may know him as Kojo. He is the FIFA team manager of AS Roma and Fnatic, and he will be joining us on all the podcasts. And hopefully, as I said, we're going to be bringing you weekly podcasts right now. So please go and drop us a follow on social media, as I just said. Let us know in the comments down below, wherever you are watching from, about the podcast, who you want to see on it. But this episode is just going to be a recap, really. There's been so much that has happened over, you could say, the last month and since the game has come out. We're going to be looking at the Continental Cup. We're going to be looking at, obviously, towards the first FUT Champions Cup. We're going to look at Gfinity. We're going to look at everything. And I don't know about you guys, but where do we want to kick off from? Richard, anything that springs to mind? We've got so much to get into. This is going to be a very long episode, but hopefully we're going to cover kind of all the points. But Richard, first topic, what should we dive into?
I think we've got to we start at the beginning. FIFA 19 released. In my opinion, pretty smooth release. A lot of hype about the game. The first bump, you could say, the first hurdle was the gameplay that a lot of people were facing, namely pros. Early on in the year, I think it's safe to say, people grinding div rivals, and I think the first thing that you've got to talk about, I'd be interested to hear Colin's opinion on this, is the transparency shown by EA this year in particular. I think this is, in my opinion, the first real year that we've seen this sort of open transparency. They came out, they released all the news for the year, when events qualifying are going to take place in advance. We've gone away with the monthly requirements. I think we've just set about the year as a whole in a more positive light, not regarding the game itself, in regards to competition structure, pro points, everything like that. I feel as though we've set off on a positive foot.
Yeah, I think the transparency thing is massive. I think not just for the competitive community, but for the community as a whole. Like the fact that Pitch Notes is so it's almost like a weekly update now of pretty much everything that's going on, everything that they've kind of identified, problems that they're aware of, so that now that when people are tweeting and saying, oh, this is an issue, then they can actually just straight up say, okay, this is an issue, we understand that, and we're trying to fix it, which I think has been really good. I think Corey and Zaro have done a really good job of kind of feeding back, as well as some of the new members added to the competitive team. So yeah, it's been good to hear. I think the gameplay is, maybe not at the place that some of the pros would want it to be. I think other pros are enjoying it more than others. Of course, if you're good at the game, you're gonna like the gameplay, right? But yeah, it's been really good, and I think most of the changes that they've made have been almost directly from user feedback, which has been really positive as well. The fact that, for example, when they came out with qualifiers and said that it was going to be a best of 1 Swiss, all the pros were like, no, let's do best of 2, and then 2 days passed and they changed it to best of 2. So I think it's pretty clear that they're listening and that they're willing to take feedback and implement it in a pretty rapid manner, to be honest, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's only a positive thing, and I think moving forward it's just gonna get better and better.
Yeah, I think some examples of that you're looking at is the side foot shot from outside the box. That was pretty much like something that they knew was an issue. What happened? A couple of days, couple of weeks later, got changed instantly. The bicycle kicks at the front post. What happened? They took it on board. It's been changed in the recent patch. That's pretty much no longer a thing now. You're not scoring bicycle kicks with Van Dijk, etc. Just the level of community, I think, is a big thing as well, because there was, in my opinion, a divide between pros and content creators. We saw it with the whole game changer thing as well, but I feel as though we're slowly starting to build it back towards a community now. We're slowly starting to reconnect, I think it is a good word for it, and I think, to be honest, that is the best thing that we can do right now in this building phase for FIFA.
I think as well, to add on to that, is that there'll be probably people listening, looking at us three saying, oh, it's easy for you guys to say good things about the game and good stuff like that. This is the podcast, is to talk about these things, is to talk about, what is going well, what's not going so well, so they can improve. It's easy to say. Nothing is ever perfect. And you saw Brent come out as well, Brent Conan, obviously the competitive gaming commissioner for FIFA, and obviously some new people added onto the team. Is it Allery? Is it Allery?
Alieri? I'm not really sure.
Alieri, if she's listening, sure. I do apologise for the pronunciation. But
we butchered it most likely.
Communication, that's one thing that we needed, and they put out a tweet. Brent did saying, "Get in touch. We want to hear your feedback. How can we improve the online qualifiers?" As you said, Kojo, they made that improvement from the one thing that was asked. From the pros. And again, as I've said, we'll talk about this throughout all the podcasts. We'll talk about the good things, the bad things, and hopefully a really entertaining year. But guys, I just want to start off with, as we're talking about these announcements for the competitive scene, the way that we're looking at this right now, we've had the Continental Cup that went past at the end or towards the end of October, and then we've got a FUT Champions Cup every month for 6 months in a row. The first one is next month, or this month, sorry. Again, we don't know where it is as of yet. We don't know what date it will be. Obviously, hopefully we'll hear that soon. There'll be an event obviously in December, January, February, March, April. And then below that as well, we've got licensed qualifiers in December, January, February, March. FIFA E-Club World Cup, FIFA E-Nations Cup, more licensed qualifiers in May, the playoffs, the FIFA E-World Cup finals. And then we've got so many virtual leagues as well. Richard, we've turned it up a level this year.
Yeah, we have. We've almost multiplied by 3, you'd say. You just see the level of events taking place, the majors, November, December, January, February, March, April, back-to-back months. It gives players an opportunity to build and to grow. And then the Continental Cup, which took place last weekend as we're recording this, over in Paris. That very good tournament hosted by ESL. They were the TO on that occasion. That could vary throughout the year to different organisations putting on events. Gfinity potentially coming into the scene. We've seen the Gfinity Elite Series taking place right now. You've also got FIFA Online 4 taking place as well, which I'm sure some people agree, some people disagree. If that should be in the FIFA sphere, you could say. I'm sure Colin will have an opinion on that. But I think everything is just building and building towards those playoffs taking place in June, where this year it's a different format. You've got to get pro points to qualify for those events.
And I had a question as well just before we jump to Colin. What have your players made, Colin, of the reaction? Obviously, Colin managing quite a few players now, and a new American in Alexander as well. What's the feedback been from your guys? Because they must be over the moon.
Yeah, I think it really does come back to the feedback point we were talking about earlier, where there were some criticisms last year of the format and kind of the amount of tournaments, and the players, all they want to do is compete, right? They just want to go to tournaments, they want to compete, they want to like prove themselves against the very best. And when you're giving your main group of competitors 30 to 40 events under the EA license for them to compete in, it's just perfect, really. I mean, I don't think anyone can complain if they don't make playoffs this year or if they don't make Worlds this year, because you have so many opportunities. There's so many tournaments. There's so many qualifiers. There's so many points up for grabs that if you don't make it, then I think it has to come down to you and how you've performed. Whereas I think last year with kind of the last chance qualifier debacle that happened, where people were getting to basically the biggest tournament of the year just by getting a 140-0. I think there were a lot of people that were very critical of that, but that won't be happening this year. And I think people are excited to see that it's truly just a measure of who's going to be able to show up at the events and show up on the day as well, because you've even seen some of the best qualifiers going into these events. For example, the Continental Cup, and a lot of the favorites falling super early, and it ended up being like, not an unknown, but not a so well-known player ended up winning the tournament. So I think it's going to be a really, really crazy year. It's going to be a lot about consistency and about just getting to the events and, getting to those quarterfinals, semifinals, and building up those points to make sure that, you're at those playoffs in Amsterdam.
And a word on that Continental Cup, mate. You must be over the moon. An American player coming out on tops, Yoxan from Epsilon, won the whole thing. A massive for the America scene. I
mean, think about it. I mean, the best player in the world, the number one ranked player in the world right now, is American. I think that says all that you need to know. And that's just the PlayStation side. I mean, we'll see what Alec can do when Xbox comes out as well. And as well, if you look at his route, he played 4 Worlds qualifiers from last year in his round of 16, his quarterfinal, semifinal, and his final, beating Andoni, Webb, Mo, and Stranger all in a row, which is, that's quite the gauntlet for a player to go through. And he did it with his own style as well. He didn't even necessarily play. It was interesting to see kind of the meta of that tournament be almost different than it had been online, where it seemed like the person with the better defense was able to come out on top, because it seemed like Joxan was just beating people with his defense more than anything.
We saw one thing that I think was really impressive from Joxan was the way that, of course, all these players that made this competition. Congratulations to all of them. Obviously, 32 made it, and they've all got themselves some points at least for that leaderboard. But I don't know if you saw it, Rich. I know we were watching very closely together, but the way that Joxan was like defending against Mo Aubameyang for a best of 3, it was incredible.
Yeah, Colin hit on it then. His defending throughout the tournament, very, very good. I think, as watching the tournament as a spectator, not actually being there as a commentator, I didn't really understand the win 2 out of 3. I personally, I kept on twitching back into the stream, and I feel as though, at the top, it said the scoreline and then how many points the player had won. I think in terms of format, I know each tournament will obviously have a different format, etc. But I think to get some continuity, I think FIFA as a whole, we have to stick to a certain format. Because I'm sure you, Colin, as a team manager, you would much rather, for example, every single qualifier to an event at the event itself, bracket play, knockouts, it's either going to be just agree on something, 2 legs, aggregate scoreline, whether it's best of 3, whether it's first of 3, things like this. We have to have some sort of continuity to be able to establish who's the best player, because, for example, Joxan could win this tournament in this particular format, where it's a group stage, but then at a Swiss-style tournament, if the EA FUT Champions Cup in November is Swiss-style, he might finish 3 and 4 in Swiss and then go out early on. So, as a team manager, how do you feel about just different tournaments having different formats and not having the same rule set throughout?
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be consistent, because if you look at the points are all up for grabs at all of these events. So if the players are going to be earning points, it should be through similar formats. So I think Swiss was, I think, lauded by everyone last year. You know, everyone loved it. Everyone thought it was amazing. And I think the more that we keep Swiss going in these types of events, the better. And then go to like best of 2 aggregate in the playoffs. I think that what a lot of what we have seen has been kind of best of 2 kind of in group play, and then going into knockouts it's been best of 3. But I think most players would prefer a best of 2 aggregate from what I've heard. It also kind of cuts down on the total broadcast time, which I think for FIFA is kind of an issue sometimes, where the broadcasts can be like insanely long.
The hours in Paris were super long, like 8 a.m. till 6 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it makes it much more digestible if you have just a 2-leg match where the aggregate score is always sitting up top, and it's much easier to follow and just kind of jump into, because it really is just one kind of 180-minute match, but it also gives you that break time in between to kind of come up with a game plan and find a way to come back if you need to. So I think that best of 2 is in my opinion, the best, but I think you're right when you say that all of these tournaments, or at least kind of some of the third-party tournaments and some of the FUT Champions Cup seem to have different formats. I think we'll still see the same from the FUT Champions Cup. So it's just about these LQEs and kind of some of the league play as well that's going to be a bit different.
And if you didn't know, Joxam did pick up €20,000 tickets for the Champions League final in Madrid later this year, and I think some like amazing like mini game booth of with a PlayStation as well. So congratulations to him. And a word on that tournament as well from the production side of things. It was good to see. Obviously, Boras involved there, you know, kind of doing the role that Mike was doing at some of the EA events, just breaking down the play for a viewer that maybe wants to get better at FIFA, or kind of like that match of the day style, wasn't it, Richard?
Yeah, I thought Boras did a good job, to be honest, analysing the games. Feels like he could have done with a little bit of help on that side of things. Maybe Mike Lobel could have been a good shout going over there. Someone like Chris Trout, who can really break down the game and get into the match itself, because it's a tough job when you're doing that on your own for 9.5 hours, pretty much straight through. I know a couple of players were joining him. Kyle Walker from Manchester City was also there helping out, doing a bit of presenting alongside Chewboy. But I think all in all, it was a good start to the year for the first official tournament. Joxan walked away with 850 points altogether, which we're not sure how big or small that's going to be for him, but I tell you what, it's an amazing start to the road to the playoffs.
Oh, it is indeed, and obviously a big well done to everyone else that did work at that event, commentary team all the way through, as you said, to Chewboy and the rest of that team. And it's a good way to start the year as well. It kind of came out of nowhere, that PlayStation Cup, didn't it? It was in Paris, and as we know, there was a complete mixed bag of players that went to that. I think you had a player from Greece there as well, because obviously the qualifiers were broken up all over the world. But let's look forward to the FUT Champions Cup, which is happening this month at some point. We're not too sure yet where it's going to be either. But we've got a list of those players right in front of me right now. And of course, Colin, you've got 2 of your boys in there.
Yeah, I mean, the qualifiers were definitely, it was definitely a bit of a grind. I mean, we ended up, I think Zima was in the EU PlayStation one, which I think had 360 competitors in it, something like that. And so it was, I want to say 26 games is how many he played in total, individual games, because we had best of 2s and then best of 3s in the knockout. And he took it down to the very last knockout game. And managed to qualify just in the nick of time. But I think it was like 18, 19 hours in front of the screen over the 2 days, which obviously, like, if you're looking at a 40-hour a week job, there are going to be the days where you're more busy. And I guess this is just kind of the busy time now is our weekend, which isn't a big deal. But I think you've already seen EA kind of recognize that it might be a bit too long of a commitment, as you've seen they've kind of broken it up even further, because there were a lot of complaints too about EMEA about us being lumped in with Middle East and Africa, where you saw people playing, like people from Iraq, from Europe with like 1 bar, or people from South Africa with 1 bar, and it being really, really hard it made it even harder for the people from those smaller regions to get out of the event, because they're playing people on 1 bar connections. But it also, I think, might have prevented a few of the Europeans getting through because they're playing people on one bar connections as well. So it's good to see that EA immediately took the feedback on that and has changed it up since then, and has kind of made it into a lot of smaller regions, because now you have EU West, EU East, and I think you have like Middle East and Africa. So there's like a lot of different kind of smaller regions now that have different amounts of spots. And then Alec fortunately made it much easier on us and just went 7-0, got the first seed, beat Goal Machine in the final, and is on his way as well. So yeah, we're super excited. Obviously, we'd like to know where it is. Obviously, it's going to be Europe, because I think they said 60% of the spots are going to go to the region for where the FUT Champions Cup is. But we're thinking maybe Germany, maybe Spain, Portugal would be nice. But I think we haven't had a tournament in Germany in a long time, and there's a lot of German players obviously qualifying for these events. So I think that might be our favorite at the moment.
And just looking down the list of players represented, I believe you're tied second for the most represented team here. IX Esports being first with Danny, Joey and Lev. But you got to be happy that you got two players there as well. You've got a chance on either side of the bracket, you could say. One on Xbox, one on PS4. How do you feel about the number of players being halved this year compared to last as well?
I think I like it, because I think it fits into a lot of the issues I think we had last season. One of the big issues I thought was that a lot of the players weren't getting enough face time, like on broadcast, like for interviews, enough like necessarily player-specific features, which I think if you looked at how the people at the Continental Cup did those features, where they literally just like had them walk around the city and just talk about life. I think like the one that they did around FUT was Tom was really good. I thought the one I think Aga did one as well, which was good. So it's kind of like a lot of the VTs and features you see come out of Gfinity as well, which are so good, which I think makes Gfinity even more valuable, is that they have these really, really good kind of player features. So I think having less players at these events is going to allow more players to kind of get in the limelight and get in the spotlight, and not just have it about, have the event be about just the guy who got to the final or the guy who won, but kind of find some of the stories in the scene and kind of bring up these players to make them stars, which I think is obviously what EA is looking to do with the competitive scene at the moment.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. These guys are the best players in the world, and they deserve all the limelight they can get. But one man that's been on fire, we have to say, I don't know what you guys think as well. F2 Tex, wow. Like, he's come into this year like incredible. Like, he's been streaming as well. He's been streaming his 30-0s, which one of them he got on a penalty shootout, which very, very stressful. But this guy, honestly, Rich, he looks incredible this year.
Yeah, I've actually had a fan question ahead of the podcast being recorded today from Mikey. He said, do you believe that F2 Tex is good enough to win a major tournament this year? Obviously, we all know he won the Barcelona tournament last year as an absolute underdog. No one really had took any notice of him coming into the tournament. He shot to stardom, you've got to say. Signed a massive contract with F2 United. The F2 Freestylers is now one of the most followed FIFA pros on the scene across Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. And like you said, he's been killing it so far in qualifying. He's pretty much beat everybody that I've seen him come up against. The question is, can he do it at an event? We saw him last year. He was very confident going into Manchester, very confident going into the playoffs. Didn't make it through those set tournaments to the place where he wanted to be. And I think he started out FIFA 19 with the main intention being that he's not a one-trick pony, that he's not only here for one event and then he's going to disappear. And is he good enough to win a tournament? I believe he is. I think it's all about if someone who he comes up against who is maybe not played before, or maybe he's unfamiliar with how they play, just completely shut him down. Herosia did that last year against him. Just shut him down at I think it was Manchester, where he did play him. And it almost looked like he'd run out of ideas. The skills weren't working for him. The shots that he were performing weren't coming off for him. So that's going to be the question.
I think when it comes to Tex, I've gone through phases of through this season of if I think that he's going to be the best player in the world or if he's going to struggle. Obviously, he was first player to Division 1 on Xbox, which was massive. Definitely proving very early on that he's willing to grind the game and figure it out. When I saw the advertisements for the new features for FIFA 19, I think everyone's first thought was, oh my God, Tex is going to be really good at this. Once you saw the active touch system where, you can flick the ball around and with people, doing these crazy volleys all the time. The only thing that concerns me now is that after this patch, I feel like it might hurt him a bit, to be honest, because it's nerfing kind of a lot of these bicycle kicks and a lot of these kind of volleys that I wouldn't say rely on, but when he's in tough matches, he might use them to kind of get out of certain tough situations. But I think it'll just be really interesting, like you said, to see how he adapts, because also watching the Paris Cup, that didn't look like an event that would have fit Tex, like the meta of that tournament didn't seem like it would have fit what Tex wanted to do around, for example, I think a lot of people say that the Stranger is one of the most clinical finishers and one of the best attacking players in the world at the moment, and he was held pretty well by Juxan. So if Tex comes up against a player like Juxan that's playing that style that can just kind of hold it down like that, I think he might struggle a bit. But I think against 99% of players, I think that you've got to have him as favorite.
And, I apologise if I haven't already mentioned him. The Stranger, obviously, he had a great tournament there as well. Some other names that have qualified for the November FUT Champs Cup and deserve a mention. It's good to see Jambo. He's back. FaZe Tass, he's back. Going down the list, anyone else that's popping out to me, seeing some familiar names in there. As we said, the Stranger, he's in there. Maestro just signed for Vitality. Obviously, Zimmer from your own organisation.
For me, there's a few names that really do stand out. I think you're looking, there's only one #United representative on the list, which is probably the lowest that we've had since the grand finals. They had two in Aggie, they had three in fact, in Boras, Aggie and Dreamer. Got him back. I think this is probably the first tournament in, I don't know, maybe ever on FIFA, on FUT Champions, since we got into this.
Into the modern era.
Yeah, into this modern era, that they've only had one player at an event. I seem to remember Paris all the way back when there was Harry and Tass who played. So it'll be interesting to see, can Ryan really just put # on his shoulders? For me, he's their star player. I'm not sure if people agree with that, if people disagree with that, but he's the one. Footridge Jamie, good performance from him down in Australia to bring that through. As I said, Ajax Esports, 3 representatives, Joey, Lev and Danny. And then Blatant Corn, who is Tom Stokes, if you didn't know. We spoke to Bullock, Brandon, about a week and a half ago for a video that's coming out, and he said, watch out for Tom Stokes. He's back on the scene, and he's, in Bullock's opinion, he's one of the best top 5 players going at the minute.
He sure is, and he's one of those players that has been around the scene for a long time as well, and it's good to see Tom hopefully get some recognition he deserves.
The other thing, Colin, from your perspective as a team manager, who are you looking there for your boys to be avoiding? Who would you think? Who do you not want to be coming up against?
I mean, I think there's certain players that we just don't match up well against. Like, for example, I think Zimmer and Aga is always like such a 50-50, and it's always such a tight match that I'd rather just avoid that and have someone he's a bit more comfortable against. Like Nicholas as well is always going to be dangerous, I think, coming out of South America. On the PlayStation side, Lev as well is another player that matchup wise against Zimmer just like doesn't work very well. Like Lev always seems to get the better of him. And then as well, if you go over to the Xbox side, I mean, the Xbox side seems pretty stacked, to be honest. The thing is I haven't really seen, Alec came over here and I think got 29-1 or something on Weekend League and played a lot of like the top pros and was holding his own pretty well, and playing Ranners as well over here. Got a lot of really good practice against European players, and obviously that's something that we're planning to do as well when he qualifies or when the event actually happens, is to have him, of course, come out a few days earlier and kind of get some more practice against the Europeans. So we're going to do our best to kind of put him in the best situations. But I mean, you got to look at the regular kind of customers like Gorilla, Rasek, Danny, all looking good. That Ciro Aurin Luck guy, I think, is Fabio Denuzzo. So of course he's always going to be tough as well. And then Megabit, of course, killing it on both consoles as he usually does isn't going to be easy either. But we're feeling confident, to be honest. I think that going into this first FUT Champions Cup, there's a lot of players that aren't there as well. If you kind of look at it, there's no MS Desari, there's no Dito.
Icevogel.
There's no Icevogel, exactly. Like there's a lot of players that got really close or just lost out or just didn't have good days. For example, like Damian Ranners just didn't have very good days that day. They both should have probably been 5-1, but ended up 3-3, I think. So on another day, it just might go better. But at the end of the day, it is all about, can you play over that 10-hour period and keep those levels up. So yeah, it's going to be a tough event, I think.
Yeah, so as Colin was saying there, with the players that have not made it, we'll have to see, can they bounce back for the one afterwards. I think that's the good redeeming factor this year, that you've always got that opportunity pretty much 2 weekends after, with how the qualifying works this year, to be able to bounce back, get your ultimate team back in. If you need to improve your squad, get the FIFA points loaded up, and try and get back on the horse.
And as we said, congratulations to all those names that have qualified for the first FUT Champs Cup happening this month. And if you haven't qualified, don't worry, there's still a number of tournaments. I don't know about you guys, but let's go and have a look at the prize pot. And Colin, coming into it, you said that you've liked the change.
Yeah, I mean, I think more prize money is only going to be a good thing, right? So, and that's what it seems like we're having here. From the math that I was able to do when they came out with the rules, is that right now we're looking at about between 3 and 3.5 million, which is obviously about $1 million more than we had last year overall, across all competitions, not even just EA events. So this is including like the the big Saudi Arabia Cup and the big South African Cup, those kinds of things as well included. It was about $2.4 million in total prize money, which is pretty decent. About $1 million increase from the first major season in the modern era, which is about 1.4 million. So yeah, now just with the FUT Champions Cups and with playoffs, it's about 3.5. So that's not counting the Club World Cup. It's not counting all the PlayStation Country Cups. It's not counting the leagues, not counting the Grand Final or the E-Nations Cups or any of the LQEs. So we're probably looking at somewhere between 5 and 6 million. And that's probably about a pretty conservative estimate for how many events are unaccounted for. But I think the prize split is really good, just as it was last year. I know some pros have said that it's a bit too spread out, like that first place isn't high enough. But I think the priority for EA is definitely to make sure that as many pros as possible can make a sustainable living off the game, and not just for the one guy to get $200,000 and have that buzzword of oh, they won 200,000. Wow, it's amazing. I think it's more about creating a sustainable ecosystem where all these players can literally just play tournaments and be able to make a living. And then once they kind of get a bit more notoriety, then get picked up by the organizations and get the additional income that way. So I think they've done a really good job. If you look at like the FUT Champions Cup, for example, first place gets 50,000, and then 30,000 for second place, and then 15 for third to fourth, and 7.5. And it scales down pretty well, I think, to where if you get into the playoffs, you're at least getting 3,500, which is a pretty good reward, I think, for your time. So yeah, I'm super happy with what we've seen so far, and you even get money just for showing up as well. You get $500 just for showing up.
Not bad, not bad. Yeah. And as we said, 6 FUT Champions Cups. All of those, if you win that event, $50,000 for the first prize there. And if you come second, $30,000. Third and fourth, $15,000. And there is going to be at some point an EA-sponsored PlayStation 4 LQE event. $100,000 for the winner there. Second place, $60,000. Third and fourth, $30,000. Some incredible money there. And then the playoffs, of course, that were in Amsterdam last year. To win that is $75,000. Plus, we've got leagues on top. We don't know if they're going to have prize pots on them. But just a few words on that, guys. That tournament, the PlayStation one, or even the FUT Champs Cups, $50,000 isn't a bad prize.
Yeah, I know a lot of pros are still asking for more tournaments throughout the year, but I think some pros, the way that I feel like they're just a little bit too demanding at the minute. Like, if you look at other games that are taking place, like, everyone compares it to Fortnite. They're like, oh, well, Fortnite's giving away 100 million in prize money. Or just at TwitchCon recently, they gave away $750,000 over the course of a weekend, or in one tournament. I think they gave away 5 million overall over the course of the weekend. But I think what people don't understand is the people who are winning like half of that prize money is already Twitch streamers who get invited to the tournaments. If you're going to do that in FIFA, I don't think it'd work. It'd be like inviting Nick 28T and the Panthers and Bateson to compete at these tournaments, and then the pros would be saying, "Well, why are these people getting invited, etc." So you have to scale it down. If you're a pro player, that is your job. Sometimes you're not gonna succeed fully at your job, and you might take a pay cut. For example, look at someone like Shells last year. Last year, he wasn't the best that he could be, and for that, the only money that he'd got paid were from Unilad, which had been his salary, because he weren't competing at tournaments. He wasn't good enough to get to that level. This year, he's got another opportunity to go and to almost, you could say, get a promotion at his job. If he gets to tournament finals, if he gets to the playoffs, he's earning more money on top of that. I think some players just feel like they almost deserve all these tournaments, and they deserve to get prize money like almost handed to them because they get 13 or they get to the latter stages of online qualifying and then maybe don't qualify for the final tournament. To be viable and to have this as a full-time job, you have to be getting to tournaments and you have to be performing well. It's almost like it's a privilege. If you're playing well and you're getting to the latter stages of the tournaments, you deserve to get paid well for it.
As well, though, to add on to that, half of these players are on salaries already from organisations or football clubs. You know, if you can bag a top 8 finish at a tournament for one, that could be that extra bit of income that would boost you up to a better wage. And at the same time, as you were saying, Richard, we are still such a young esport, you know, compared to traditional esports, as we want to say. You know, we are a sport esports as such, and what EA have been pushing it for just coming over 2 years now, and the way that obviously they're now working very close to FIFA, the organisation, and with the FIFA E World Cup. You know, progress is being made, and overnight you can't just go, right, we're going to turn into Fortnite or anything, because at the end of the day, we're FIFA at the end of the day, and we're all about the slow progression. I believe even Brent's come out and said that as well. You know, we're making small steps, and over time, we saw the viewership grow up, we saw the tournaments go up, we saw the amount of people playing professionally, you know, go up a level. It's all about, as Colin was saying, that ecosystem of more people being able to play full time.
Yeah, I mean, I have, you know, kind of some internal documents that I was able to kind of learn a lot, I think, over the last 2 years. And one thing I can tell everyone is that compared to the first year of competitive to the second year of competitive, double the amount of people have made money playing FIFA, which I think is amazing. I think it went from about 110 people 2 years ago to now about 225 people last year, making at least $1,000 from tournaments, which is incredible. And I think it was like over 50 people made $10,000 or more, which is just, you know, unbelievable for these guys, being able to make that, where 3 years ago the grand final, you know, the World Cup was $20,000 for the winner. So the fact that all of these guys now are making, you know, 5 figures, some of them making 6 figures. You see a lot of like the pros as well now are pulling crazy viewers, with Tech's pulling like 4,000 or 5,000 viewers on Twitch. I think that a lot of the people, like a lot of the pros have to, you know, I think some of them have started to recognize, but I think all of them need to recognize that it's not just about the tournaments and about showing up and qualifying. It's about growing your brand, about building that YouTube channel, building that Twitch channel, making sure that you have those supplemental incomes, signing with a good organization that's going to treat you correctly and pay you decently, so that you have almost 3 different avenues of income, you know, through your social media channels, but also from your organization and from prize pools. And you add all this together, you could be making, you know, $100,000 a year, which is incredible when you look at where we were 2.5 years ago. So I think it's only positive, and I do get that feeling sometimes from pros that they feel a bit entitled in some ways, and that, oh, Fortnite this, Fortnite that. We're not Fortnite, and you know, I think everyone's just going to have to recognize that, and that's perfectly okay. It's okay. Fortnite is an anomaly. It is not normal. Being a part of Fnatic and, you know, seeing all the inner workings of all the other esports, Fortnite is an anomaly, and it's a weird esport, and it's you know, it's growing super fast, and the prize pool is massive. Also, that's not just for the year, by the way. That $100 million prize pool, I think it was like over a few years, maybe 2-3 years or something like that. So it wasn't just over a year. And I think if you look at how we're scaling up, it's a healthy growth. It's not because if EA really wanted to, they could just come out and say $100 million for FIFA, you know. But would they actually get that proper return on that investment? I don't necessarily think they would. So I think they're growing it in the right way, getting the right people involved. When you see people like the Premier League coming in and seeing, you know, people like ESL getting involved on the TO side, like it's only getting better. And I think it's going to be the people that are here for the long haul and are here to really invest in the scene are the people that are going to be in the best position to get that payoff, you know, in 2 to 3 years time, when we do have an 8-figure prize pool, and, you know, you have all these big leagues and all these players are getting paid crazy money. So it's just about patience.
I think as well, you know, what you said about the becoming a brand as such. I think some players are slowly grasping that, you know, if you can build your YouTube up, you can build your social media, you know, you can get those opportunities. We're seeing more and more Red Bull athletes, for example. A really good example, obviously, is Aggie, who's been in the game for a long time, Boras been in the game a long time. Then you got someone else like #Ryan, who over the last 18 months has had that growth, got himself obviously a Red Bull endorsement on the side. And that's the way it should be. You've got to say, Richard, it's nice to see brands coming into FIFA and making athletes as such have that extra source of income.
Yeah, that's why we often say just be thoughtful of who's actually looking at your tweets when you're tweeting out that you've just conceded a near post bicycle kick and you think that the gameplay is rubbish today, or you're getting delay or whatever it might be. Just remember that those tweets are there pretty much forever. People can screenshot them tweets, people can look at them tweets, and they'll come back to haunt you in the future, potentially. We've seen it in the past with players picking up, with teams picking up players, and then people going back, finding tweets, finding Instagram posts, and players being dropped instantly, because I'm sure Colin would agree with this. If he signed a brand new player and he went back and found out that this player's been tweeting racial slurs, whatever it may be, Colin would drop him instantly, because you're not only reflecting bad on Colin and on Roma Fnatic, but you're reflecting bad on everybody across that brand. You're reflecting bad on esports in general. It's just not a good look, and I think some players just need to think before they press that tweet button, or before they post that, whatever it may be, to social media. Just remember where it's actually going.
Everyone sees those tweets, you know? It's not just for your fans or for the other pros or for all of these people. It's you know, the team that is scouting you, you know? I know a lot of other team managers. I know most of the other team managers in the scene, and I know that some of us have blacklisted players because of the way that they present themselves, or the way they act, or the way they speak, or the way they tweet, or the way they conduct themselves at events, or the way they, you know, there's so many things that teams take into consideration, because there's so many pros right now. There's so many you know, pros out there in competitive FIFA, and a lot of them don't have teams. And you know, so when teams are looking at picking up free agents, there are a lot of options. And if, say, you and another player are, you know, about equal skill, about equal following, but one guy has some questionable tweets, or his personality has some question marks, then you're probably going to go with the player that you think fits better with your ethos, with your team, with your teammate, with his teammates, with, you know, the organization and what it stands for. So I think the people, you just need to recognize that it's your future. A lot of these guys are young, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you just have to really think about what you put on social media. And if you're trying to build a brand, you have to do it in the right way. Like, there's some people that have created that kind of unique brand, which is really cool. So like Tex has created his own unique brand. #Harry's created his own unique brand, and they've both been really successful. And you got a lot of the German guys that have created their own unique brand. Like Mo's done a great job as well. And I think the more that you can kind of create your own individual fan base, even someone like Zelonius has done a great job over the past year. So yeah, it's very, very important, these different sides of it, because that tweet, I guarantee, is not going to, the 110 likes and the 14 retweets you get off that tweet because of that, crap goal or whatever, isn't going to be worth it when you don't even know that you might have lost out on 20 grand, off of a year contract or something just because of that tweet. So you have to be mindful. You have to be more aware of your presence on all social medias and in person, because people notice that.
And leading on from that, of course, we're not saying don't tweet, we're not saying put your personality or don't hold your personality back, but you've got to be very thoughtful with how you're putting yourself across, because at the end of the day, there's people that look up to you and look up to the position you guys are in, of getting to travel around the world, get to be a professional FIFA player if you are at an organisation, or if you're a free agent looking to go to somewhere. And we're lucky to have Colin on board that can give us that insightful information. But the last thing I could say we could talk about before we wrap up episode number 1 of FIFA 19's FUT Champions podcast. Again, if you have been enjoying this, please do go and drop us a follow on our social medias at FUT Champions Pod. We're on Instagram as well. Let's talk about November, because it's going to be a busy month. It's going to be a really, really busy month. I guess we have to kick off with the qualifying event, the qualifiers for the qualifying event, the LQE that's happening in December this weekend, 3rd to the 4th. As you know, you've got to get your FUT Champions verification status by October the 22nd. I know your players have had a little break, Colin. I've seen Zimmer and Ranners go back home. They're coming back for quite a heavy month.
Yeah, that was actually the strategy behind that, was just to give the guys a few days off before we basically are entering Hell Month, which is what we're kind of calling it, because you have qualifiers every single weekend, every single month, plus Gfinity on the Fridays. So we pretty much have Friday, Saturday, Sunday qualifiers or competing every single day. Giving them a kind of mental break before we go into it is going to be really important. But yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think it's only 16 players per console for this next LQE. So it's going to be even harder to qualify than it was last time. But it's going to be interesting. I think different players will have just good days, and different players will have bad days, and you'll qualify for some and you won't qualify for others. So it's really going to be kind of a toss-up as well. I think the matchups that you get, like you could, for example, at 0-0, you could get Mo Aubameyang at 0-0, and start 0-1, and then you could at 0-1 match, another top player, and all of a sudden you're 0-2, and you have to win 6 straight or whatever it is. So I definitely don't think it's going to be easy, but I know all of my players are good enough to qualify, and we're preparing the best we can. Of course, Enzo being in the house is a big boon for us to have a coach around. But yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot of sacrificed weekends from the pros.
I think as well, personally, it's going to be very interesting to see who really starts to take precedence in these qualifiers. Who are some of the names that you're seeing just pop up pretty much at every event? I think you're going to see the likes of the Stranger,
Alec.
Well,
if you think about it, though, I think that 2 years ago, the reason that a lot of teams were picking up NA players and rest of world players was because of the regionality.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's coming back around now again, where it's now regional qualifying, where you've got guys from NA and from rest of world and from these different regions that now, if you have a top player in one of these regions, like MS Dasari in the Middle East, for example,
Honey Badger with hashtag.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have these players that you pretty much know are going to qualify every single month. Like those kinds of players now, if they even just do half decent at the live events, they're going to qualify for the playoffs. So I think those players are going to rise even higher in kind of the standings. Like I wouldn't be surprised if one of the top ranked people, like in the top 5, top 10, come the end of the year is like an NA guy, or it's a South America guy. Like, because I pretty much, like Nicholas is going to qualify for every single event now. if it stays like this, right? If it's coming out of South America, he's going to qualify for every event. Someone like Alec and Goal Machine, right? They're probably going to qualify for every single event out of North America. So it's going to be super interesting with the really strong players from the other regions to see if they, if they can even just get to a quarter, get to a semi, even just get out of groups. Like, they'll probably have enough points at the end of the season to be able to make it to Amsterdam and probably to Worlds as well. So I think the value of those types of players is rising exponentially recently.
And, we are in that situation again where players ask for events or ask for qualifiers to play for. We've got them. We've got them now. I know November's going to be a heavy month, and there's going to be obviously that FUT Champs Cup in there. But you could say, thankfully, there's not a licensed qualifying event in like a LAN event. I mean, in that month, because you'd have 4 qualifiers and 2 LAN events to try and manage.
It's going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy. But at the end of the day, we have got more tournaments, and it gives players the chance to pick and choose what they want to play. I know everyone's going to want to play everything, but you could focus on the FUT Champions events because they give you more points. The prize money's slightly more as well. Or you could go for the other angle of just aiming for those licensed qualifiers. But I think we've covered most bases for this first podcast, guys. And we've looked at prize pots, we've looked at qualifiers, we spoke about the Continental Cup, we spoke about the FUT Champions Cup #1, the transparency from the guys at EA. Is there anything else we want to cover, guys?
I think the final thing that we should speak about, which is new this year, really, is the big transfers that have been happening in terms of FIFA esports players actually switching teams and getting transferred to different teams. Some of the big ones, Werder Bremen picking up Megabit, big signing. No fucks given esports as well. It's Christian Fuchs team, Leicester City defender, bringing in the likes of Habidi and also Mohamed Al Bashir, 2016 world champion there. Schalke esports making moves with the big man Icevogel, yeah.
The Kingfisher.
North making their debut in FIFA esports, picking up August Rosemeyer, formerly of #United. Speaking of #United, as we said, Honey Badger joining those.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if you mentioned at all, Rogue.
Yep.
With Goal Machine going there, and Nicholas Razek. There's rumours of potentially MS Dasari moving on. We don't know if that is true or whether he will stay at that organisation.
Crafty has joined Lille.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of big moves. Danny Taylor to goal, obviously Alexander to Roma.
I think the best transfer has to be, in my opinion, Nicholas moving to Basel. I think that puts Basel in like the probably top 3 strongest rosters in the world at the moment, with Stranger, Nicholas, Cody, and Luba. So I think that's probably, you've got to say top 2, maybe top 3 rosters in the world right now. Like that's just insanely strong.
And let's not forget, Gorilla, still a free agent.
A lot of big free agents, aren't there still?
Yeah, a lot of free agents still looking for teams.
Team Vitality looking really good as well. Signed Maestro, and they signed Herosia. The French organisation there with Rafsu as well. That's looking really good.
Yeah, a lot of strong rosters. I think a lot of the best players now have teams, but I think there still are, probably 5 to 6 like top players that still haven't chosen teams yet. I would honestly be surprised if Gorilla goes to the first FUT Champions Cup without a team, if I'm honest.
So you think he'll sign before that?
I think so. I just don't. I think it's hard to see him without an organization at an event. I think that's, unless he wants to go there and like prove himself again on the big stage. But I don't think he really needs to do that at this point, does he? So I'm sure he's already in talks with someone or finalizing something. I mean, like even we saw Boris Legend, right, the other day, pretty much said he had a deal done all the way up to the signing the papers, and then it all fell through. So yeah, it seems like there are teams interested. It's just a case of the players trying to make sure that they're picking the right ones.
If we were to speculate, Colin, where do you see Gorilla potentially going for that FUT Champs Cup for the first one?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough, but you know, whoever's doing it, I think Gorilla has spoken before. I think about wanting to have a team that actually has kind of an actual foundation, like kind of ambitions for FIFA. So it'll be interesting to see who he ends up with.
And also as well, we've got to remember this man is obviously a world champion and has achieved quite a lot. And I was going to say, if one place would go, it would be Manchester United if they suddenly popped out the blue before the Premier League qualifying events went right. We're jumping into esports and we're going to sign that. But
that'd be a pretty Manchester United thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I would go out on a limb and say the most consistent player we've seen over the last 2 years, Gorilla. Up there with a couple of the German players, but I think he's a safe bet for any team to pick up. You're going to be, and that's I think why you're going to be paying the amount of money that you will be paying for him to be under your roster. You're going to pay a premium. It's like any football player when you're looking at like a Ronaldo, for example. They might not be the best player in the world at the time, but you're always going to get a good performance from him. He's always going to be there, 8 out of 10 performance, quarterfinal, semi-final, and then it can go on to win things. Look at Ronaldo in the Champions League. At the big tournaments, he always turns up, and I often say Gorilla is that representation to Cristiano Ronaldo from football to real-life FIFA if you're going to put a player on it.
There you go. That's the comparison from Mr. Richard Buckley. And I think that basically concludes episode number 1, or let me say episode, sorry, podcast number 1 of FIFA 19 of the FUT Champions podcast. If you've listened all the way through, you've listened to a little bit, you've come back, you've missed a few bits, thank you very much for even clicking the link and coming by and supporting the podcast. We're very happy to have it back. We're going to try our best to be consistent with this as well, and we're going to be getting an editor on board as well. So a big shout out to Luke, who's made the intro possible to this and has made this podcast possible as well. A big shout out to that man. A big thank you as well to Richard Buckley, as always, and Mr. Colin Johnson, aka Kojo FIFA. I'll put all those links down below, including mine as well, if you want to go and check us out on social media. And if you could drop a like, whether you're watching on YouTube, if you go and drop us a subscribe as well on the podcast website or on YouTube. And make sure you go and follow us on Twitter, at FUT Champions Podcast. And without further ado, that leaves us to say goodbye. Good luck if you're qualifying this weekend for the event in December. Good luck if you're playing Weekend League, or more importantly, just enjoy your weekend. And until next time, we shall see you later. Bye-bye.